welcome to another episode of SaaS Scaled. I'm so pleased to have Tim Ouimet with me, and he's from Engage3. Fascinating story. We had a discussion just before this recording, and I hope that you enjoyed the discussion as much as I do. It will be a casual discussion, like always. Naturally, organically, we just sit down and talk about different topics that we believe it will interest other colleagues at other software companies. And of course, after it's posted, you're more than welcome to, leave comments, any questions you might have for either of us, and we enjoy always receiving comments and questions from you. So with that quick introduction, Tim, I would like to welcome you and ask you to tell us a little bit about, the story behind, what you guys do and how you started, and tell us a little bit about yourself. I had the pleasure to listen to that story. I think everyone would enjoy if you share with us a little bit of that.
Thank you, Emma. Sure, I'd love to. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, watched my parents create a company, and that was a company that provided competitive pricing data to the retail industry. So if a retailer wanted to know what their competitor down the street charged, my family business would send people into the stores to collect the pricing data. So from 7 years old in the early 70s, I was collecting pricing data, and that was my job. And I got to know retail from that point forward, and got to see the inflationary times of the 70s, and that really I got to see what it was for a service company to scale at that time. It was before computers and any technology, so it was all pen and paper at that point. My brother and I both vowed we didn't want to get involved with the company because we saw how brutally tough it was to scale a service company. That said, I went my own way and started a business out of high school, and I was happily growing a B2C service company, doing about $500,000 in ARR. Margins were growing, customer acquisition costs were dropping, client retention was near 100%, and revenue retention was over 100%. I'd grown it to a large company in my market space, and had 4 employees, all paid above market. I did 2 small M&A deals, and I felt good. I loved evolving the business model, and I knew I was providing the best service I possibly could to my clients. That felt really good. And my company grew by over 100% 6 years in a row. And that's when my brother called. And he was pursuing a PhD in theoretical physics, chemical engineering at UCSB. And he said he had an idea that related back to the family business. And this is at a time when there was a new data foundation emerging in retail. What used to be that manufacturers held power and they told the retailer what to do. But with the introduction of the UPC code with point of sale systems, and what had just developed was data warehousing. So retailers now had an ability to hold on to this very valuable sales data in a time series. And so he called me very excited about applying a lot of the quantitative methods he was learning and experimenting with to the retail data the data that retailers had. And so immediately the idea took me, and I apologize to tell a story you've probably heard too often, but we sat down at a coffee shop and he wrote a formula on a napkin and handed me the napkin and said, "Here's an idea. It's worth $100 million. I only want half." And so we were off. We took it seriously and started exploring the idea. Pretty much everyone told us we couldn't do it. One retailer who actually understood what the word optimization meant said, "The first thing I teach all my bright young MBAs is to forget all that BS you learn in Economics 101. This is retail. It doesn't work here." But we were too young and dumb to know that it couldn't be done. And so we did it anyway. And
And when you say sorry, when you say it was difficult or hard to do or impossible to do, you are referring to the complexity and the fact that data is not even comparable in most cases, right? So that's the challenging part of this task.
yeah,
The other
there
aspects.
were so many challenges. One, just getting retailers to give us the data to innovate. We
Mm,
didn't have a product yet, and we needed their data in order to to go through the innovation steps to create a solution. And so we really needed to partner with someone who was going to give us some of this very proprietary data.
mhm.
And so it took us 3 years just calling different retailers until finally we found one that was willing to share some data with us.
Mm,
And that's when we ran straight into a brick wall, which was we found out why a lot of the experts in the field said it couldn't be done. The first model we came up with, we optimized prices, and for like a 6 pack of Coke that might have sold for $1.50 at the time, it was recommending $8 for as an optimum price. And we only knew one thing, that was the wrong price. It was definitely not optimal. But then later it occurred to us that it really was optimal. It's optimal if you want to go out of business tomorrow.
mm.
Short term, it's optimal. You could probably get $8 a 6 pack from a few shoppers and make a lot of money, but you're not going to be in business long. So we realized that in order to help companies, the challenge that we had to frame the problem in a different perspective. And everyone who'd approached it before came from the manufacturer's perspective. That's really where all the research, the R&D had come from. Universities were paid by manufacturers to do research on this data, and they pretty much all said it raises prices. And so we came along, and because we'd grown up in retail, we were able to adopt a retailer's perspective, and that was really the shift that made the difference. Taking the perspective of a different market participant, and recognizing that we had to optimize against a time scale as opposed to tomorrow. And those two innovations were really what allowed us to crack the nut on it and be able to produce what retailers considered implementable prices, meaning they could implement the price recommendations without review. And one of our first clients was buy.com. So that was so it was fully automated, the pricing there, and we saw great results. Typically what we would be able to do is help a company lower its prices while simultaneously increasing profit. And it's an interesting trick because usually it's one or the other. But what we found is that by looking at the sales data, we could understand better what the shopper wanted. And by understanding, retailers often operate on a loss leader strategy. They give a low price on one item to bring people into the store, and then charge a marginally higher price on other items to offset what they gave away on the loss leader. And if you get that wrong, you're wasting margins because you're giving shoppers low prices on items where they don't recognize the low price. And those are margins that could have been allocated to a product that shoppers really did care about. And when you get that right, what you see happen is that the multiples, people buy 2 or 3 of an item instead. So all of a sudden, that's where it becomes more profitable because now you're really driving sales. And it helps using price and incentives to help align the client or the retailer in this case with the market. So it's when you get the two aligned, that's where efficiency happens. And that's why you're able to increase sales, increase trips to the store, and increase profit. It's better. It's a win for both.
So that pricing intelligence that you bring to these, companies, that essentially being smart about the pricing and set the right price so they can, essentially it's more about optimization, right? From different aspects. When you do that today, is it fair to say that most of it is just algorithmic at this point, and it's not like a lot of manual things that you have to do, or still it's a hybrid model that you have to run algorithms, but also you have to add the human intelligence involved and just build that kind of as a hybrid model?
Yeah, it's really a combination of both. It's the art and science of pricing,
Okay.
and that comes through really in two areas pretty significantly. One is in managing the data. So it's really a knife fight. It's often the process starts with competitive pricing data, and no competitor in the world wants to be easily compared with their competition. So the first thing you find is that you can collect competitive data, but it's not easily comparable. And an easy example would just be one private label to another. One's one size, another one's slightly offset size. One has, so it different names, different sizes, different UPCs. It's not easy to compare. And then you look at this across the millions of products in the marketplace, and you say, wow, that's a big job to try and make all of that comparable when there's new products entering at a faster rate than ever before, and inflation, size inflation, all these things are happening. So there's changes everywhere. A UPC is not a comparable unit when you have sizes changing.
So you are essentially maintaining a big data about data. So those kind of metadata definitions that you have to maintain and make them very comprehensive makes your engine smarter. And
Yeah,
sometimes the more comprehensive, the better definitions, the more dimensions, attributes you define, all of those logic that you define behind the scene. And over time, you have to maintain it. And the bigger it is, the more maintenance probably, and you have to maintain all of this data that you have now.
that's
But
right.
it has exactly the value that now you have something valuable that is not super easy to just build from scratch overnight. It
That's
takes
right.
a while.
Yeah, especially when you've curated it over time, and it's a balancing. You use algorithms and AI and machine learning to get you to the right answer, and then you use human intuition to review and approve. And so it's a process like that, and then you put a learning algorithm on top of that. So when a human does go in and layer on a different perspective, you're using that as part of the feedback loop, so that it's iteratively getting better over time.
So on a slightly different topic, the name is Engage 3. So where
Mhm.
does that name come from, and where does that 3 at the end come from?
Yeah, our first company was called Kymetrics, and we sold that in 2006, and we were effectively we were primarily focused on providing a solution for retailers. But we realized that there's actually a lot of conflict between retailers and manufacturers, that there's contention over what they call trade funds, which is how much money a manufacturer is going to allocate to a promotion in order to effectively buy down the retail price and increase volumes. And so that contention and the fact that power is shifting to the shopper, we said what we need to do is align the retailer and the manufacturer through one pricing algorithm, that one incentive mechanism, that where it can align their interests towards mutual interests of serving the shopper. So Engage3 was engaging with a shopper, a retailer, and a manufacturer in a mutual interaction. And that's the vision that started the company. And we would say, if we were to rename it today, it might be Engage 4 or 5, because there's more than just the retailer, the brand, and the shopper. You could include healthcare. You could include, the list can go on about other people who have an interest in incentivizing sales along the way.
Interesting point. Now, we had that discussion before, and you raised a very interesting point. You just mentioned healthcare as one of the parameters. Can you a little bit expand upon that? Because I think that's a really interesting point for everyone to know. May not be necessarily, a software discussion for this
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
but it's a very interesting topic.
But I think it's important to follow paradigm shifts. And one of the things that we all can see the smartphone out there is a massive element of a paradigm shift. We have online, retailers making their assortments and pricing available online. So that's a massive influencer of a paradigm shift. And then one that's not so obvious is the healthcare. Mm-hmm. And that is that for every dollar that's spent on food, for the 50% of Americans or beyond that have a chronic health issue that's food mediated, there's for every dollar that's spent on food and beverage, there's $6 spent on healthcare for disease conditions that can be food mediated. So there's a lot of potential interest in that pool of money to incentivize healthier options in retail. And the one size fits all that tends to, top down approach, which is we'll just give everyone a voucher for fresh vegetables, doesn't seem to work so well. And it doesn't have the scale that's needed to really drive behavior change in retail. And so that's where there's another constituent out there who could actually reshape the entire industry if they were to participate in incentivizing healthier choices in retail. And the cool thing about it is it becomes a race to the top instead of a race to the bottom. Right now, the entire industry is kind of funded. Most investors like predictability. So if you look at bringing a new food product to market, investors want to know that it's going to be predictable. And if you're coming up with a net new product that's, maybe a health option that people have never had before, mostly investors are going to shy away from that because it's not as predictable as a high volume, low cost product. Those things tend to do very well. And so the whole industry is kind of engineered around introducing new high volume, low cost products. However, often those don't have the health attributes that other products would have. And so what we begin to align on, if we can align these interests, is a flow of money that supports a race to the top, which means how can we better align industries' innovation, industries' scale, and a mutual exchange that aligns all this towards the shopper's needs and preferences, so that the shopper gets healthier food for less.
Based on what you said and based on your background, I can think of a lot of questions and different directions to go, from entrepreneurship, starting a new business, to really talking about, the way you see it, that businesses can be optimized from the analytic perspective, and the way you have seen that it can scale in one direction or the other if the data and analytic scalability. So there are many different directions to go. But I wanted to ask you one question first, and that is, you mentioned when you started the company at that time, and we all have done it. I'm entrepreneur and serial entrepreneur too. So there is a level of craziness to really start a business from nothing, because you have to really start everything from zero, from the ground. And that's a lot of work. Would you do it again if you were out of this company and say, now I took a vacation and I'm back and I'm bored? Would you do it again and say, let's go start a company again from scratch?
When we sold our last company, Kaimetrics, I said I would never start another B2B company because the sales cycles were so brutal and all. And I thought I would want to do a B2C company. But fast forward a few years and we were right back in the same game. So it's really attractive. To me, the fun part comes when you get to manifest a vision, and you feel like, after we sold the company, I was spending time going to coffee shops and not really having a strong direction in life. And I'd come home and my wife would ask me, did you have a good day? And I didn't really know quite how to answer that question. And so it was having a company that can occupy kind of a long-term focus was something that I really enjoy that process.
Yeah. So this is really more about building something, and then you have built it. It never
Hmm.
existed before, and you feel like, if you were not taking action to start it, it wouldn't never have existed. Now it exists. It does something, serves a purpose. That's fantastic, and that's, as you say, that's the drive, I think, for most entrepreneurs to get involved. And even if they have done it and they say the same thing, never ever I'm going to do it again, they will forget it. They will come back and say, let's do it again. This is really great. So, in your work, there are a lot of things about data analytics, and many SaaS companies, many software companies nowadays, data is at the core of their business. They are directly or indirectly working with data. They are directly or indirectly working with analytics. They are creating value out of that data for the customers that they have, and that's sometimes even the product itself.
Hmm.
Now, um, there was a report recently, Stanford actually published very recently, that, looking at the data, it shows the not just the AI aspect, but also it shows that this is the growth of AI, everything, and it's about artificial intelligence. But also it shows you that what is the carbon footprint for creating this intelligence. We are living in a world that when we do this computation, when
Hmm.
we really compute something, write these algorithms, run them, behind the scene, there are a lot of things going on. There are servers running. There are, you know, if you are using, for example, AWS, they are adding servers every day, maybe thousands of them. And then in order to address the increasing need for data processing, analytics, um, and what is the impact of that on the environment, especially the older technologies, that majority of servers and computation today is running on servers and nodes that have to be running. Even if you are using them 1 hour a day, you are still running that 24 hours a day. Now with these new technologies, microservices, serverless, that will be the future. We are hoping that that will be more optimized, faster to scale, sharing the resources, not keeping this all the time, even if you are not using it. But how do you see those kind of things can impact businesses? How did you experience firsthand that this is really where we got to the point that cost was too much from the analysis, from the data perspective, or maybe data was not, but scalability, performance became an issue, and you had to come up with some kind of ideas to address those one way or the other, and
Yeah.
overall perspective that you might have on this.
A few things come to mind as I hear your question. One of the first areas of scalability we ran into when we were early in the life cycle of the first company, there was a few that we ran into that really speak to what you're talking about. One, database scalability. We were trying to move massive amounts of data. When you're talking about retailer point of sale data, and you're trying to move that into a database on a daily basis for a large retailer, not only one but many large retailers, you're doing that's a lot of computation. Better to share that data in a different way, but that's a lot of data to move. And then when you're trying to build out arrays of that data, and you're looking at, okay, let's look over 2 years worth of time, 500 products, all of the sales data. That's a massive array just for one category. And if you don't approach it intelligently, you're going to burn through a lot of computational power, just like you said. So now you're also talking about not only database scalability, but algorithm scalability. And so we had to, because in the early days, we didn't have these massive platforms. You would buy like a machine from IBM, and that's what you had to work with. It had to work within the confines of that. So we had to be a little, this is where I love capitalism and a pricing mechanism, right? Because the cost of your time, your resources, your energy, and all forced us to say, look at the algorithms and not be wasteful with it, and so you could take, say, artificial intelligence kind of, there's different ways of approaching it. Some just totally burn through the processing speed. For the database engine, what we actually found was we didn't need the overhead of a a data warehouse that was built for saving point of sale data at the time. There was a number of popular brands. We built our own database at a binary level. We built a relational database system that operated at the binary level because what we were doing was so specific. It's a price, it's a date, it's a quantity. And so from that level, it was easy to convert that into a relational binary system, then have that go through, and then it became algorithm scalability. And how quickly can you get the optimization to run? Now, the technical term that for what we're doing is we're looking for a global optimum, which means that usually you've got some time series and you're trying, or some range of top to bottom, and you're trying to find the point that is going to yield the highest return. And so you have to search that entire space. And if you're using a brute force method, which or a neural net type of method, it could take days, weeks, years to solve the problem. But if you customize the algorithm again for what you're doing and say, okay, we know exactly what we want to optimize for here and what the boundaries are, and you design the algorithm to work within that space and for the types of data that you're seeing, we were able to get algorithms to run in seconds that were, we could optimize for a 2,000 store chain in all prices across all stores within about 3 hours. And that's what it took our nearest competitor a week to run an optimization for just a few categories of stores on the same relative computing platform. So that's the difference between scale, and that's the difference between the carbon footprint you're talking about. Are we just throwing out of the box algorithms at it and saying, let that do it? Or are we actually going to say, what exactly do we need to throw at this? And I think if we have honest pricing of cost and things like the energy, things like that, price, when it's transparent, is a great mediator of demand, and also it's what entrepreneurs can innovate against.
Do you see a near future, meaning in the next 5-10 years, that it would be less challenging for example, getting this information that may be so hard to get it? I mean, you have some memories from the time that you were in your childhood, in a very manual style, you were asking or you were seeking this kind of pricing information. And now you see it in a different age with cloud, everything, the data that we have, and all of the speed that you can ask. And then I'm asking, how do you see it's emerging and in the next 5-10 years? Or do you think that the pricing it's just the nature of the way it works, and this is the best you can ask for, and there is no other reason to think that it will be so easy, much easier, API driven. You can call this API, get the pricing of everything 10 years from now, and there is no kind of middleman in between, and most of this will be very direct from different companies. Web3 is going to change it, so I don't know, maybe at least digital kind of products will change first before other products will change. But do you see some of these movements that may actually lead us to a different place from pricing intelligence that you are talking about and getting the data?
Yeah, I do see both more mutuality coming into it and competition remaining that make it difficult. So I see both. And from a mutual perspective, I think the power is shifting to the shopper. There's no doubt about that. And so as that happens, that's a great rallying cry to align mutual interests across ecosystems in order to serve the shopper. As that alignment happens, we see more data sharing, more API strategies, and it's companies are more willing to work together, sharing data in order to support the shopper. So I see that happening, and with that, data takes a while to mature. So when point of sale data first came out, it wasn't the same across, not everybody stored it the same way. There was differences between stores and systems and this and that, the other thing. So it's come a long way towards maturing. And I see the same thing happening with all the new data that's available today. It takes a while to mature. And I think that while we have this mutuality of interests towards serving the shopper that aligns everyone to work together and share data and make it better, there's also competition, which the beautiful part about competition is it's a fight. If you it helps everyone stay sharp and innovate more quickly. So that's a beautiful thing. What happens as well, so you've got competition, which creates a challenge. Nobody wants their product to be easily compared to the competition. And so there's always a struggle to differentiate. It's sales 101, differentiate or die. And that happens in our world in a massive scale. And so it's a cat and mouse game to make things comparable when everyone's trying to differentiate. So that, I think, will only persist and get worse. Not worse, but that's how companies will get better at differentiating and serving the shopper. And then I think one final point is that science is evolving. And so if we just look at nutrition as an example, we have the nutriome. And we know that the nutrients in the food matter. And now they're finding that if you ask a food scientist about protein, they'll say, well, which one? There's like over 100 different types of protein. Some are good, some are bad. So I think we're going to get to a level where the amount of data about data exponentially increases, which is going to create new problems for this comparability that you just mentioned. So I think we have three things: the evolution of life and science, the competition, and then the mutuality are all elements that will continue to go faster.
The other trend that I personally have observed, and I'm not expert in that, you are more suited to really understand that aspect very well. And that's about variable pricing. Of course, airlines, you see they have the variable pricing, and they're one of the first businesses that came up with this kind of idea that our price should not be fixed, and depending on the seasonality or popularity or timing, and if the flight is already 50% booked or not, then the price should be different. Now, I have seen actually even in some restaurants that sometimes the menu items, not a lot, but I have seen in some places that the menu items can change the price because of the timing, because of the day, and then they give you the variable discount and coupons. That essentially it's more like variable pricing, even if the price stayed the same, but the discount can change it from many. So you see that this variable pricing is getting more into different kind of places, and I think that can drive demand, right? So the whole idea is if I have the right time, the right pricing for the right time, for the right audience, then I can optimize my revenue and I can get more. Do you see that in more kind of become norm in more industries, not just airlines, but even in a restaurant, in other services, they think about that kind of, of course, we see it in Uber and Lyft and these kind of services too, but do you see it to be more often available now, and the trend that you see is more gearing us toward that kind of world, that the price is going to be variable all the time for everywhere we go?
Yeah, I do think we're driving towards that at light speed. For me, what comes to mind is agent-based shopping. With that, we are entering an age where agents can do all of our shopping for us. That's a much different world than we live in today. But done right, the variable pricing is really segmenting your market. And it's best when customers self-segment themselves, right? Come in for happy hour and get a lower price. That's an example of self-segmentation, that we have a lower price. When capacity is low, we want to increase volume to offset the margins. It's a good business decision. And if it's self-segmentation, that's great because the customer understands it and does it to themselves. So I think that's done well. Done wrong, it ruins trust. When there were some companies years ago that were experimenting. We'll give this shopper one price and give this one another, and shoppers would find out about it and get upset. It was confusing and it didn't make sense. And I think that's an example when it's not done well. The future we're going into is, I think, machine to machine. And when machines can go do price discovery, prices are transparent and they can do discovery faster than at light speed. Now you've got a different game that you're playing. And now is when it's really important to understand what a shopper values, because even I mentioned buy.com was a client early on, and retailers at that time had the belief you had to win the buy box. Mm-hmm. You had to be number one on the lowest price on the buy box in order to get the sale. And what we saw was that their brand had value. And so it took a while to work with them and help them understand they didn't always have to win and be number one on the buy box to win the sale. And what they found was it was true, especially if somebody's building a basket, like they're getting multiple products. If you understand your value proposition to the shopper and the shopper understands what you do that's valuable, you've got some mutuality there. That's you can charge for that. And as long as you're not, the shopper understands it, and they kind of know roughly where you're at. Yeah, maybe I know I can get a cheaper deal somewhere else, but I like all the other values I get from you, so I'm willing to pay a little bit more. Then it's fair and acceptable. And I think that's the future we're driving into, even though it'll be machine to machine. I think that brand still counts, and brand value won't go to zero.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I would like to ask you if you would please recommend a book to our audience that you think you liked it. It can be about what you do professionally, or just a book that you liked and it has had positive impact in what you do. So, is there a favorite on yourself?
It's funny when you first asked that question. You told me you were going to ask that question. I thought of Zig Ziglar's books on sales, because I early on in my career I read those 2 or 3 times, maybe even more. I really got a lot out of those. But more recently I've been reading a book by Don Beck about spiral dynamics, and it's kind of a funky name, but the whole it's really an idea of how we as people become more how we mature over time. And to me, it gives me a lot of insight into how we can all work better together, and how we can evolve our interactions and our organizations. And so, to me, that's a special book.
Thank you very much, Tim. It was a great discussion, and definitely I enjoyed it in the previous one as well as during the session here. And I will follow your company and what you do, and we will reconnect for sure in the future. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Armin. Pleasure.